Okay. Remember how Jamie Dimon a few months ago was like, well, we should just seize people's private property for, climate change policy. Remember that? Like, private property doesn't exist to Jamie Dimon. If his friends at Goldman Sachs, who basically designed all this like crap that the UN is backing, and green finance and blue finance for Mother Earth and whatever, if those projects decide that they want your property, I guess they'll just turn off your money, and we'll know who everybody is, because there's this parallel push to end online anonymity and financial privacy going on here, which is part of this whole like narrative too about like Bitcoin and financing terror transactions and stuff. Like, it's all about like KYC and like linking your digital ID and government issued ID to every transaction, having even the smallest transaction $1, 50 cents, is surveillable by the banks and the government, right? So people aren't just going to be like, yeah, let's do that system if they launch it without some sort of event that causes, fear and panic. So I think it's likely it'll get rolled into some sort of like cyber Patriot Act after some sort of mass cyber event that the banks have all gamed out. And the WEF, which runs this partnership, the banks and all these intelligence agencies are a part of, say it is going to happen before January 2025.
So you heard Whitney Webb that she believes there is a huge event coming up, which will panic everyone to have their government-issued digital IDs attached to their wallets and banks to be tracked by government and banks. And this is going to happen before or around January 2025. Furthermore, Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Chase, recently suggested that the government should seize private property to expedite the construction of renewable energy projects like wind and solar farms. This provocative statement has raised concerns about governmental overreach and the implications for individual property rights. In her discussion, Webb highlights the broader context of Dimon's comments, connecting them to a pattern of behavior where crises are used as a pretext for expanding government powers. She argues that the push for renewable energy, while ostensibly beneficial for the environment, could lead to a significant erosion of personal freedoms. Webb emphasizes that the government's involvement in seizing land for renewable projects could set a dangerous precedent where individual rights are subordinated to state interests under the guise of climate initiatives. Webb argues that the implications of such a shift could be far-reaching, affecting not just landowners, but also the general population. This could potentially result in a society where personal data and movements are constantly surveilled. Furthermore, she discusses the potential for these initiatives to be tied to broader economic systems, such as central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, and stablecoins. Webb cautions that the integration of digital currencies into everyday transactions could further entrench government control over financial systems, allowing for unprecedented levels of surveillance and data collection. In addition to her warnings about CBDCs and stablecoins, Webb has also cautioned about the potential co-opting of Bitcoin by powerful institutions. She has specifically highlighted the recent moves by BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, to invest in Bitcoin. Webb suggests that this could be part of a broader government plan to control the financial system and monitor citizens' transactions. Webb's insights suggest that the push for renewable energy, while often framed as a necessary step towards combating climate change, may also serve as a vehicle for increasing government control and surveillance. The intersection of private property rights, renewable energy initiatives, and digital currency systems presents a complex challenge that requires careful consideration of individual freedoms and the potential for governmental overreach. Now let's get back to Whitney Webb's recent interview to listen to more of her warnings.
Well, I mean, so basically, in this article, it focuses on this particular network that Fluent Finance, which was partnered with, this SBF Deltec thing. They're sort of in this network with like the XDC network and R3, right? And R3 is developing CBDCs all over the world, but they also have like they're casting a wider net than just CBDCs. They have this thing called the Digital Currency Accelerator. And they're basically focusing on not just CBDCs, but deposit tokens and stable coins. So like any entity, banks, central banks, whatever, can like sandbox and like test out their digital currency and add programmability and all this stuff that people are concerned about when it comes to CBDCs as it relates to impacts on individual freedoms, specifically financial freedoms, right? So they've created all these tools to make it happen really fast. The question is, I think at the end of the day, trust and adoption. And so what I've sort of brought up on some recent interviews is this stuff I've been writing about since 2021, how the biggest banks in the world and the biggest central bank, some of the most important central banks in the world, in this WEF partnership and the Carnegie Endowment, which at the time was run by the current CIA director, were basically gaming out financial cyber attacks on the financial system. And a lot of people don't know this, but the entire financial services industry in the US, so all of the big banks, have an ISAC, which is an information sharing and analysis center, where their CISOs all get together privately and game out threats to the system and how to respond to them. So all the Wall Street banks have had since 2021 a unified plan about what they'll do if there's a big cyber attack on the banks. And so if you're the biggest bank, these same banks that caused 2008, and that there another banking crisis and economic calamity is inevitable, and you don't want to be blamed by people when they're angry about their money not really having value anymore. How do you get around that? I don't think they want a repeat of Occupy Wall Street. I think that's pretty clear, right? So how do you, get around that? Well, you're oh, well, these faceless hackers took over the financial system and we have to relaunch it with these things because it's more secure and, we'll know who everybody is, because there's this parallel push to end online anonymity and financial privacy going on here, which is part of this whole narrative too about Bitcoin and financing terror transactions and stuff. It's all about KYC and linking your digital ID and government issued ID to every transaction, having even the smallest transaction $1, 50 cents, is surveillable by the banks and the government, right? So people aren't just going to be yeah, let's do that system if they launch it without some sort of event that causes, fear and panic. So I think it's likely it'll get rolled into some sort of Cyber Patriot Act after some sort of mass cyber event that the banks have all gamed out. And the WEF, which runs this partnership, the banks and all these intelligence agencies are a part of, say it is going to happen before January 2025. So the whole mess on the border too, in terms of its intentionality. So it's not just happening in the US, it's happening in similar ways in a lot of other countries. In my opinion, this is one of the main ways they're going to shoehorn in digital ID. We have to know who everyone is because there's too many migrants, and we have to know who has what rights and who can do what. And so we all need digital ID for everybody. That's biometric and all of this stuff. And I'm sure they'll invent something oh, there's fraud, there's fake IDs. We have to have secure, interoperable IDs, just designed by ID 2020 and then SDG 16 and whatever. Yeah, so that's definitely going to be part of it. And then you have this whole added thing of something crazy is obviously going to happen with the economy next year, whether it's provoked by a cyber attack or whatever. The way the UN, UNICEF, World Food Program has set up all of their stuff for humanitarian aid is the WorldCoin model, which is scan your eyeball and we give you a digital ID and that tells us whether or not you eat or not. If you want to get your rations, you have to go to wherever the rations are and have your eyeball scanned.
Additionally, Whitney Webb has also raised significant concerns regarding the connections between FTX, Alameda Research, and Farmington State Bank, particularly following the collapse of FTX in November 2022. In her analysis, she highlights how Alameda Research invested $11.5 million into Farmington State Bank, which was a substantial amount considering the bank's historical asset base of around $10 million. This investment occurred shortly before the bank rebranded as Moonstone Bank, signaling a shift towards a more innovative banking model aimed at cryptocurrency and digital finance. Webb points out that this relationship is emblematic of broader issues within the cryptocurrency sector, where traditional banking practices intersect with high-risk financial maneuvers. She emphasizes that the subsequent fallout from FTX's bankruptcy, including the seizure of $50 million from Farmington by federal prosecutors, underscores the potential for systemic risks when traditional banks engage with volatile crypto markets. Webb warns that these developments could lead to increased regulatory scrutiny and a re-evaluation of the relationship between banking institutions and the cryptocurrency industry. And that's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future updates. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more.